Welcome! Today we are creating a gather wood sign. For supplies, first up is our wood panel. These 10 by 10 panels were about $5 at Walmart. They have a flat front surface where you could put the stencil and do the main design. Or you can choose to flip it over, and I used the back portion of the panel. I liked the fact that the back edges, the raised edges, you could paint to mimic a frame. I will be creating that frame by using a wood stain. I happen to have some dark walnut Rust-Oleum wood stain on hand, so I will be using that for the frame portion of my panel. I will be using black paint for the design portion and white paint for the background of my panel. You just want to make sure they're contrasting colors. And lastly, I will be using this stencil cut with a Cricut machine to get the design. My first step will be using my wood stain to paint the outer frame. Again, this is the back edge of the panel. I will be using about this 1-inch paintbrush to apply my stain. And just be sure to mix up or shake any paint or stain you're using before you get started. And now I just want to make sure I get every part of the frame, including the edges. Whether or not I'm using the front of the panel or the side, we want to make sure all of the edges are covered with our painter stain. I will also be painting the back flat portion of the panel for my project because mine will be freestanding, so I want to make sure the back is covered as well. Once complete, I will now let it dry. Now our panel is completely dry with the stain, so I will be flipping it over and painting the recessed portion my background color, and I will be using the white craft paint to fill in that portion. So I'll be using this foam brush to apply the white paint for the background. I put a little bit on each side of that tip just so I can do a smooth back and forth motion on the flat side of my panel, and then just keep going over until I fill up all of those empty spots. So now the entire recess portion, our background, is complete. I will probably go back with a finer tip brush just to fix up any of my mistakes and do any little, cover up touch-ups. And now I will let it dry. So now my panel is dry and I will be applying the stencil. The stencil has 3 layers to it. The front is a gridded transparent stencil vinyl. Using just to hold the stencil pieces together, as you can see, there are some little fine details with the letters and the little leaves. The back is the white portion, that is what you will be peeling off to reveal the sticky portion of the actual vinyl stencil. And so we will peel that off first. As you can see, there's 2 layers there. It kind of gets a little opaque as I peel that layer off the back, and now the adhesive portion of our stencil is out, and then we will flip it over and try to center it as much as possible. I'm just kind of eyeballing it to the center of the panel, and I'm just going to kind of lay it down gently, and I think I'm just going to use a ruler here to just see that it's generally where I want the design to be on my panel. So I'm just kind of making sure it's centered, and now I will be going over with that hard edge. This is a tool that came with my Cricut to use to smooth out vinyl, but you could use any hard, thin piece of plastic or metal just to kind of smooth out that stencil onto your surface and make sure that it is completely down. And now I will be peeling the front of that stencil off, and this is probably the most painstaking, time-consuming part. As I go, it's kind of pulling up away from the frame a bit, so you can see I'm using my fingers and that hard edge to push down any bits that are trying to pull away from the panel.
Eternity later.
Okay, that part was kind of rough. That is the most time-consuming part of this project. I will finish off the stencil by pushing it down once more with my hard edge, just to make sure all those little bits and pieces are adhered to the surface of the panel. This is to avoid any leakage when we start painting. Now that my stencil is down, I will be going in with the black paint and using the little plate here as a palette. I am just going to very gently dip my brush in there. I'm going to be very sparing for this portion. You can see I'm just going to take a lot of it out just so that that paint is absorbed into that foam brush. I want to avoid leaking any of this paint outside of the stencil, so I'm just going to go in very gently with this brush now and go over the design portions of the stencil, just very carefully dabbing over the design. Okay, so now I've covered the stencil completely, and I will now give this a good, probably at least hour to dry, so that when we take the stencil off, there will be no chance of it smudging. Okay, so my project is now dry, and I will peel the stencil off. And there we are. We have now completed our gather sign. There are some different options you can do if you wanted to customize it a little further. I'd recommend either some sandpaper, maybe to distress both the the background and design color of the paint. You could, if you did the frame portion like this sample, you could distress the frame as well. And then mine is just freestanding, but if you chose, you could also attach twine, either with like a staple gun or hot glue, however you want to do it. You could attach twine to the top to hang it, or you could flip it over and on the top back of the panel install some sort of hanging hardware like a sawtooth hanger. So that is the complete project. I hope you enjoyed, and join us next month for our next project.